At the beginning of 2009, kind of a lot of things went wrong for me. I had a messy breakup, I was unemployed, I had no income whatsoever. I stood outside a soup kitchen in my hometown, and a guy pulled up next to me in a car, quite an expensive car, with his wife and his son, and asked me if I was looking for work. He said that as well as working, he'd give me somewhere to stay. He'd provide food for me, he'd try to make me as comfortable as possible, and he'd pay me £50 a day. It turned out to be not quite how he'd sold it to me. My boss decided to go up to the site that his family lives on, and there everything went very, very quickly downhill. He stopped paying me anything at all. My boss was working quite often with his brothers, and they treated their workers very, very differently to how my boss treated me. There was a lot more violence. They were kind of physically punished for the slightest little thing. They were beaten for not working fast enough. I've seen people attacked with work tools, with spades, with pickaxes. All of the other workers, they had their heads shaved. They lived 15 men in a horse box. There was no freedom. They couldn't talk to anybody else except for, amongst themselves and with their bosses. We were working up to 15 hours a day, and it's very, very physical work, very, very heavy work. So there were a lot of broken-looking people. There was no rest. Every waking minute of every day was spent working somehow. My boss's father was in the process of expanding, so he was using all of his son's workmen to, after 15 hours out working on somebody's driveway, to come back and do precisely the same thing for the rest of the time that they were awake on the yard. And it was all very, very basic. There's no kind of heavy machinery that you associate with landscaping work. No, big mechanized diggers or anything like that. Everything is done by hand. So very, very difficult. There's no opportunity to clean yourself. There was no running water available to us. Certainly no showers. No hot water. There was one toilet that we all shared that was never cleaned and very, very rarely worked. In terms of food, we'd normally would be given a takeaway meal every day. There were guys that had been there for 5 years or more, they'd given up all hope. They couldn't see any way to leave. They'd seen people try to run away in the past, and always, every single time, a day later, 2 days later, they'd be dragged back. I was desperate. I was looking for a way out, but kind of in vain. As far as I could see, there was no way out. And at the same time, I knew that if I was to escape and by chance not be found, if I could kind of hide myself, I'd be going out to nothing at all. At the end of 2009, my boss decided that he was going to go and work with a cousin of his on the continent. He had a lot of family who were kind of already over in Europe, mostly in Scandinavia, but there were people in Germany, in France, places like that. They were phoning back to the UK with all of these wonderful stories about how essentially you get off of the ferry and money falls in your lap, basically. So we drove down to Harwich Docks, got on a ferry and ended up the next day in Holland, where it was much of the same. We were met with a lot of suspicion. It turns out it wasn't as easy as my boss's relatives had painted it. They had only done one job in Holland, and that they were going to move on. They had one relative who was more or less permanently based in Sweden. While we were in Sweden, we were traveling for a little while with another member of my boss's family, and he had a very, very young worker, a 17-year-old. Who was appallingly treated, really, really terribly treated. And one day he disappeared from the campsite, turned up in Stockholm, really, really badly beaten. He'd gone to the police there as a last resort, and told them everything. One day we were working on a job, and 3 police cars pulled in next to the job, and told us that we needed to go with them, that we hadn't done anything wrong, we weren't under arrest, but that it was very, very important that they talk to us. A few months later, there was a trial. My boss was found not guilty in the end. The judge who was judging the case said that she understood absolutely that these were circumstances that no person should have to live in. But based on the law at the time, there wasn't any way that she could say that we were kept against our wills or that this was human trafficking. I'm aware that the law changed shortly after our trial, thanks to a lot of work being done in the EU. The EU Commission took an interest in our case. So we were assured by Sweden's EU Commissioner that kind of she was going to do her best as well to make sure that this can't happen anymore, to make it very, very difficult for people to exploit people who had been in our situation. My boss was arrested in September of last year, along with all of his brothers, his father, an uncle of his. They stand accused of 19 counts of holding people against their will, various charges of assault. So hopefully now something is being done about it.